Hey everyone, Cyfix here. Real quick, I am just recording a short little beach tutorial for terrain because somebody asked for it. So I'm going to go ahead and just make a random 2000 size map. I'm going to set the ground height at 500. Doesn't really matter for now, but I'll wait for this to load up. Alright, I am, for simplicity's sake, just going to run a height map in the procedural tool. Alright, perfect. And then I need ocean topology, so I might as well go over how to do ocean topology real quick. So you're going to go terrain painter, topology, conditional paintbrush, select ocean right there, and then you're going to select height and go -500 to 0. So that's going to select all heights between the very bottom of the world and beach level or the water level. So what this is going to do is going to paint everything beneath the water level. And we just paint the map with that, and then we should see water appear as soon as we're done with that. Just make sure I get everything in one go. And there we go, there's our oceans. So now I can double click to teleport to a nice little beach spot. And obviously, if you're looking to do beach terrain, your beaches probably don't already look like this. So I'm going to, just as an example, kind of mess the beach up a little bit. That okay. Um, I see a lot of beaches on custom maps where people don't really take their time with the custom maps. I mean, that's even something like that. This is what I see a lot of beaches end up looking like, which honestly, it somewhat works, but just learning how to do this and taking the time, it goes such a long way. So what I'm going to start with in the terrain tool is the flatten tool. And so in here, I'm going to select this third one just because it's a circle with a little bit of a fade on it. I'm going to bring down the size a little bit and bring the flatten mode to lower. And then I'm going to bring it to 499.5. So that's 0.5 meters beneath the water level. And then I can turn off water here. And I can just paint out a little, kind of like our little raft you can think of it as, just to build off of. So you can see we now have that little raft. And we'll deal with this cliff down here afterwards, so you don't need to worry about that for now. And then what we can do is take it to the higher tool, and then we can do control right click to sample the terrain height of wherever our mouse is. So you can see how it just went up to that, and now we're only affecting the stuff higher than it. And I can just come through and bring back the terrain just a little bit. And again, we're going to have a steep cliff face on the end, but we can deal with that easily afterwards. So that's all good for now. We're just going to give ourselves a little bit of space to work with. And then already you can see, because there's only about 1.5 meters of difference between this bottom part and this upper part, you've already got a quite Minecraft looking, but a functioning beach. But to finish it up and just add the finishing touch on that, we're going to bring the smooth tool, maybe like 16 to 20%, about this size, and okay, a little bit higher opacity. Just enough to just get that gradual slope going. All throughout here. So now you can see we have that really gradual, nice slope. Amazing to spawn on, and I think what a lot of players would love to spawn on compared to what we had before. So now for this back part, actually let's do the underwater part because it's probably the easier part. We can either just bring up the smooth tool with 100 opacity and just sit there and flick our hand back and forth, and eventually it'll kind of wear it down to a good slope, or we can use the slope flatten tool, which is a little bit broken right now, but still somewhat functional. So I'm just going to bring the detail down. The detail can easily break, so just make sure you don't ever put it back up, which is weird, but hopefully that tool gets fixed at some point here in the future. And bring the opacity down. This just kind of works like a really powerful version of the smooth tool, and it's really just for like more heavy lifting, less detailed areas where you just need to get the terrain kind of smoothed. And so its purpose is basically to flatten the terrain while maintaining the general average slope of the terrain. So it's flat on this axis because it took the average of the flat and the vertical. So it really just a better way of smoothing in a lot of cases. So now that we have that nice slope off, I'm going to come in here, and for the upper part, you can do multiple different things. You can either do cliffs on this part, which it's always nice to have some cliffs in front of the beach. But for like the lower parts, you really just want to play with the smooth tool. But you always want to make sure that there's a buffer. You can see how when I smooth, it brings terrain out towards the beach. You want to make sure that you're not bringing it too close to the beach because, well, then you're taking away from the beach, and you want there to be a good little bit of flat terrain at the very least there. So I'm just going to kind of play with this, kind of smooth it around. I think I want to do a cliff here, so I'm going to leave that, and then kind of smooth this out right here, smooth this out a little bit more around here. That's looking fairly good. So I'm going to go in with the raise and lower tool now on this setting, which is probably my favorite setting for the raise and lower tool, just because it's so soft, I guess is the word. And then I always use the raise lower tool on super low opacity, sometimes like 0.6. Bring up the size just a little bit, not that big. And then I'm going to hold Alt to invert this so it's going down instead of raising. And I'm just going to kind of tap in here, creating like a pathway up. This isn't really necessary at all. At this point, you're just adding detail. Really, it's all about getting the blend between the terrain and the beach to a good level. And so, yeah, we can kind of bring that back. And then, you know, say we accidentally remove too much, we can either not hold Alt and bring the terrain back up, or the better thing that I like to do is go back to the smooth tool, bring the opacity back up, and then smooth it to bring it outwards a little bit. So then you get the really gradual smoothing. So a lot of times you are just going to be bouncing back and forth between the raise lower, sometimes flatten tool, and then also the smooth tool. Those are the main three that you're going to use for pretty much any terrain work ever. And I'll go more in depth on that in future tutorials. I'm going to take the flatten tool quick and make these, wait, no, higher. I'm going to sample about right here, and I want these cliffs to cut off right there, so I can just cut those off. Smooth out the back connectors and all that terrain back there. And then for the front of cliff faces, before you put the actual cliff prefabs on them, one thing that I see people kind of not do, and what I really recommend doing, is just light opacity, just smooth it just a little bit, just to get rid of the jagged edges. Because when cliff prefabs pull the texture from the terrain beneath them, those jagged edges can be seen in the shading. Kind of a bug, but so yeah, now that those are smoothed up a little bit, I can just slap some cliffs over it. Should just be able to do these in one per. Yeah, it doesn't really matter. I can just that. And then quick tip for cliffs is you always want the back of it to be lined up as good as possible with the terrain. You want it to be really hard to tell where the cliff ends and where the terrain starts. The harder that is to tell, the better the cliff is going to be in 90% of cases. And again, this isn't perfect, but for the tutorial's sake, I'm just going to keep it going. Do another one over here. And yeah, so you basically have the cliffs split up, or the beaches split up into cliffs and spill-offs. The spill-offs where the players can come up, and the cliffs where, well, it's just more flat area up top to build, and it looks nice. Then for the splat, you really just want to make sure that there's enough of a buffer for the beach to be. So always just, you usually want to keep it in line with where any cliffs or the terrain starts to really change. So if you got, where's a good example of this? Yeah, so I got this area where it's like still pretty flat, where the terrain starts to change. So like right here, you can see it start to slope up a little bit more. That's where I want that grass line to be. And that's the end goal for that part. So get the grass across there, and then obviously come in with the rock texture and eventually do all that, make the cliffs look all pretty. But that's a tutorial for another time. That is an awful example. Just kind of make it follow that a little bit better. It's really something that you're just gonna have to practice with and get used to. Part of this is always going to be like the artistic side of it, where you just have to, I don't know, keep going. There's, you can only give so much in a tutorial. A lot of it is just the experience and getting used to it. And I wish you guys the best of luck with that. Yeah, that's looking pretty nice. For topology, obviously we're going to want to bring the ocean back and make sure that any new beaches are unaffected by ocean topology. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go in with the eraser and kind of just redo what we did at the beginning of the video, where we erase any parts with new beaches, can go out as far as we need to, and then we come back in with a conditional paintbrush with the -500 to 0, and we can easily just get our beaches right back to how they were. And then we can also use the conditional paintbrush for the beach topology itself, actually. So I usually just go like 0 to 1 or 0 to 2, something along those lines. So you get the beach topology there, and then you also need, if I can remember right, you're gonna need ocean side going to like 3. You're gonna want that to overlap like further than where the beach goes. And then beach side can be past the beach, so like it would be 1 to 3 in this case. So just taking up the other part that wasn't filled by beach. And I'll have a more detailed video on what all the topology does later on, so you guys can go watch that if you want. I do have a map that you can load up on a test server and see what every single topology does in the meantime, which is really useful for stuff like this. But really all you need to know is that the beach and ocean side control player spawns, or at least are part of the player spawn process, and the beach also spawns like the little wood piles, and then beach side will spawn some bushes and just kind of make it look nicer on the beach side. So yeah, that's about it for this tutorial. I hope you guys enjoyed. I think this is probably going to be my first tutorial uploaded to the channel, so if you guys liked it, stay tuned for more. Join my Discord, first link in the description. Thank you for watching.